live in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so welcome everybody to the Vertical AI podcast. We're back here actually outside of Zoom now and in the Waterloo Brewdog studios. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Remus Pop, the CRO and co-founder of Neurolabs. Welcome, Remus.
Hi, Andy. Thank you very much for having me here. Finally, we got to get together and do this podcast.
And what a great setting, right?
It's amazing. It's very professional.
Indeed, indeed. And so today we're going to be talking about the vertical AI opportunity in the consumer products industry and really talk a little bit about Neurolabs, a bit about Aforza and Ava, our vertical AI, and really get into the business value that we're driving for our customers. So before we do that and jump in, maybe it'd be great to just take a bit of time to talk about yourself and your background and how you got started with Neurolabs.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me go back all the way to my childhood. No, so I'm originally from Romania. So growing up in Romania, I fell in love with mathematics, physics, science in general. So all my life, I loved science. Then I moved to UK to study for my undergrad, where I discovered technology, which to me is an applied science. And after graduating, I moved into the industry here in London, which again is applied technology.
Sure.
So it was a bit of a
So quite a technical background then.
Technical background, yeah, technical background. But then I think that naturally I found out that I feel a lot happier and more like comfortable, like at home, being out there in the industry, or like
Sure.
being out there with people outside the lab, to put it that way.
So you like the technology, but you really wanted to see the practical use cases out in the real world.
Yeah, because the technology gets you excited, but it's even more exciting to put that technology to good use.
Sure.
And I remember from my early days in banking, we were making use of technology. However, you were so cut off from the actual impact of the technology, and having the technology at heart to me it was a bit painful. And at the same time, back then, 2016, 2017, there was kind of like the dawn area of AI, and everyone was talking about AI and how AI is gonna take over the world and all that. So I started digging a bit deeper into AI in my own free time, and then I realized that this is it. Like for me, that was it.
Sure.
AI is really applied science, applied technology, and to me, having something that is an overlap of mathematics, physics, computer science, biology, neuroscience, like wow, okay, this is the ultimate applied version of any applied science.
Absolutely. So all that background ultimately led to Neurolabs. And so tell us a little bit about the company, your co-founders, how you met and how you came up with the name Neurolabs.
Yeah, sure. So Neurolabs, so first what we do at Neurolabs, we build what we call synthetic image recognition. So it's a scalable form of computer vision that helps transform pictures, videos into data.
Sure.
Or like insights. You're very familiar with computer vision. I don't think we need to discuss too much about that. But it's a very important application of AI because it can lead to the automation of many repetitive tasks across many different industries. But also, like, imagine having the technology assisting with countless other like eyes in the world. So the potential was always great, and it's still very big these days. Now, I went back to uni, and that's when I got reunited with Patrick and Paul, so the other two co-founders.
Yeah.
Yes. So the three of us, we were studying AI either theoretically or in an applied form in the industry. And then back in 2018, we decided to start our own company. And mainly because the three of us, we came across this kind of new way of building computer vision, like building image recognition. We call it synthetic image recognition because it relies on synthetically generated data as opposed to real data.
And can you explain a little bit for our listeners, what do you mean by synthetic data? What is synthetic data?
Sure. So first of all, let's talk about AI,
Sure.
right? AI. You have this powerful algorithms. Now, these algorithms need a lot of data to make sense of the world. Now, the question is, how do you get data? How do you get your hands on the data? So for every specific industry, you would start developing this AI by starting collecting data, real data. And then you would curate this data so that it could be used by the algorithm to learn from it. Now, if you rely on that approach, your algorithm is only as good as the data set that it was trained on. So it's very difficult for the algorithm to extrapolate to new situations. The real world is very complex, and there are always surprises out there. So it's extremely difficult to build something that is future-proof from an image recognition point of view if you are constrained by the data that the algorithm was trained on. Now, our idea was to eliminate that need for real data and replace the real data with synthetically generated data. And what I mean by this, think about virtual reality, right?
Yep.
Now, the virtual reality is a form of, it tries to be a copy of the real world. And we do a similar thing in our case. So we take the real world, we digitize the products, and we take them into the virtual world.
Got it.
And once inside the virtual world, through different virtual reality engines, we simulate many different environments and settings.
Now, but just before we jump into what that means for consumer goods, because I think a lot of our listeners will be interested in that, let's talk a bit about the background, because the idea for this actually came from the gaming world, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I mentioned it was the three of us that started Neurolabs.
Sure.
So Patrick, he was working on his PhD, so he was looking into what we call synthetic data, but at a theoretical level, like latent spaces and all that. I was looking at synthetic data from a more applied angle during my master's degree in Edinburgh.
Right.
And then Paul, at the same time, he was leading a team of computer vision engineers here in London for a company called Huddle, where basically they were building algorithms that track football players on the field. So you know the nice stats that you get at the end of the game?
Yep. So Sky Sports summaries of how many kilometers a player's run, or?
Yeah, but you'll be surprised how big of a market there is for this technology, but for the football clubs themselves. So,
right.
Especially in the Premier League, like most of the football clubs, they use this technology during their trainings, training sessions, and not just games. But
it's also science-driven now, right?
Yeah, it's science, exactly, science-driven football.
Got it.
So Paul was leading this team, and they were relying a lot on real data. So they had this huge team in India just annotating real data, going through frames and following players with the cursor of the mouse. And then he realized that this doesn't scale, because the moment they try to take the technology from Premier League to Denmark, for example, it wouldn't transfer. So because the technology would be so specific to one particular region. So he had the idea of using like FIFA from EA Games. So he simulated lots of games using this engine.
You're playing computer games to mimic the real world, and then using that data to train engines.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. And is it just FIFA, or is it other games? Could you use racing car games and Formula One games?
You could do pretty much any world that you can simulate online. You can do it. Now, of course, there's always this what's called the domain gap between the real and the virtual world. The better you can close that domain gap, the better it is for this approach.
Right, understood. So how did you go from that concept in a football game and training engines to, how does that then jump to Neurolabs and how you started the company and what the focus was there?
Yeah, so Paul came with this approach that existed back then with EA Games. But then we thought about, okay, where else could we deploy this? Like what industry could benefit from this? Because if you think about this approach, it's not new. And back then it wasn't new. In the autonomous driving space,
Sure.
the companies out there, they've been leveraging this approach, I don't know, since 2010 or even before that. But they take it to a different level. Like they build their own engine specific for their own simulations, and they use it a lot for testing, but also for training the algorithms, but mostly for testing. So we thought about it. Okay, how come like no one has tried to at least replicate that in a different space? But then at the same time, we realized that some of these game engines were getting really, really good, and they were becoming open source as well. So we thought about, yeah, let's try it. Let's try it to different industries. And to be honest, like when we started,
did you start in consumer goods, or was that one of the industries you looked at?
No. So our story is a bit unusual in the fact that, so we don't have the classic story where I worked in this specific industry for 20 years. I spotted an inefficiency, I addressed it, and I quit to turn that into a business. With us, it was more like three guys that believed a lot in this technology.
Got it.
And the question was, okay, how do we...
So you really are technologists at heart, right? You were passionate about the technology, and it was like, where can we take this?
Exactly. Yeah. I think you've met everyone.
Yeah,
so
I met the
far,
team.
So
Yeah.
I think you could tell that we are
a very technical group. Yeah.
nerdy people.
Well, no, just to even I'll echo our co-founders at Aforza, but I certainly know Nick, our chief product officer, says that our whole R&D team really enjoy working with you guys because we think you've got a very superior technology and you've got very smart people. So that whole description of what you said and where you focus, I think really echoes across the company.
Look, I think that's our pure DNA, and actually that's reflected in our name as well, Neurolabs, because you asked me before. So, we got so many questions like what the hell is this Neurolabs in the CPG space? If you look at companies around, like and actually why
haven't you got vision in your name, right? Yeah.
Once we got this this very funny this remark from this investor saying, well, look guys, all good, but can I just ask you to change the name because you just give like neuroscience vibes. But going back to the origin of the name, so back then the hot thing in terms of AI was deep learning.
Okay.
Like today is Gen AI, back then was deep learning, and deep learning, the backbone for deep learning are neural networks. So Neurolabs, so it's called neural networks, so neuro, and then labs. We were researchers basically, and we always wanted to have that research
and ongoing innovation.
Yeah,
and
exactly. So
yeah.
And to be honest, I think back then we were also quite inspired by all these like big tech companies that had like research labs, and I was like, okay, we'll be Neurolabs.
Hey, staying at the forefront of the innovation is so important.
But who knew that we'll end up in the CPG space?
There you go. So what was the jump to CPG? What did you see in the consumer goods market that really made you think there's an opportunity for this technology there? What was the pain of a challenge that you were solving here?
So when we started, we didn't really know where to take this technology to. So we had initially a very generic approach. We'll take the technology, put it behind the platform, a generic computer vision platform, and then we'll just wait for different industries to speak to us.
Okay.
Now, it happened to some extent, but we were getting like false positives, a lot of noise. We had use cases from, surveillance, like security space, car parking, like very
lots of industries, lots of horizontal applications, right?
Yeah, but then we realized that in most of these use cases, our approach was improving on the traditional way of building this technology, but it wasn't a game changer.
Okay.
And we ended up looking into the CPG space almost by accident, I would say. But then the moment we started looking into it, we realized that, wow, this is the perfect, what we call technology use case fit. Because the technology relies on real data. And if you have industries where there is a lot of real data, but more importantly, if the real data is diverse enough, or put it differently, if you don't need a very high degree of specificity
Yes.
for the products of interest or like objects of interest, then you're fine, because you can just rely on real data. So think about the security industry. You know, if you have a surveillance camera, you need to detect cars, vans, people, animals. So they don't, like all these concepts, they don't change that much year on year. So there's a lot of real data. So that's a solved use case in a way from a computer vision point of view.
But
now,
for CPG? No.
Now, you tell me.
Yeah.
So for CPG, just to begin with, the sheer size of the space, like the entire universe of products, we're talking millions of products.
So that's quite an interesting stat. You were talking to me about this earlier. So if you go into a typical large supermarket and you just think of the current SKUs at any one point in time on the shelves, I mean, we're talking a lot, right?
It depends. So a local super, like Tesco superstore, they could carry up to 120,000 products.
Wow, okay. And again, that's not static. Week by week, there could be a promotion. It's Christmas, it's Easter, it's a World Cup.
And that's exactly where the big challenge comes from.
Right.
Because let's say you put all the effort in, collecting real data of all 120,000 products. Now, on average, every quarter you have something like between 10 and 20% of products that change their visual appearance. And the thing is, the barcode, the encode, the product can be the same. It's just that the visual appearance has changed. I know, it could be there's a seasonal promotion going on, the World Cup is on, or
the Olympic Games, or there's something that you
and the nature of this space kind of requires this very high rate of innovation.
Okay. So you've got this industry with lots of variants, lots of products, lots of SKUs, and then you've got this technology that allows you to basically apply gaming algorithms and engines to simulate these products. Is that where you saw the opportunity?
I mean, if you put them this way, like one by one, it's not very clear what the connection is coming from, like games and the consumer space. But basically, what we do is we take the real products and we build a digital copy of those ones. We call them digital twins.
Right.
And then once we have access to a digital twin, we can control that product to a very, very high degree in terms of where we simulate that product to show up. It can be on the shelf, in a cooler, you name it. It can be on the moon if you want, on the beach. But we can also control the geometry of the product.
Right. Okay.
So we can manipulate the geometry of the product, and we can squish something. We can place another object in front of it. So we can build all these very difficult situations for the algorithm to deal with. And typically, if you wait for the real world to give you these edge cases, it takes a long time.
It takes time.
And what we are doing is, once we have this digital twin, then we can simulate a lot of data. We can basically go wild in terms of the diversity in the data
This
set.
has really clicked for me. So I've got a 6-year-old son, and he loves Spider-Man on the PlayStation. And I've got to say, the worlds you walk around in Spider-Man, New York City, and you go into a supermarket, you see the products. Essentially, what you're saying is those virtual objects that Spider-Man interacts with, or any of the characters of the game, you're taking that technology and you're using that to simulate what a CPG rep might see in a store.
Exactly, and it gets really, really interesting the moment you move a bit away from just the shelf. Because if you look at the technology, the image recognition in this space, it's been mostly used to capture insights from the shelf. Now, what we are seeing more recently is that the customers, they are expanding their horizon beyond the shelf. So first of all, they are expanding their horizon beyond their own product catalog to the entire category, but also they are starting to capture what we call visibility, or like insights across multiple touch points in their retail execution.
Well, and not just in, I think typically in the image recognition space, when you're looking at a shelf, I think everything's been modeled off of the perfect shelf. So if a product's tilted, or if a product's upside down, or if the product is covered by another product, it's not going to work. Whereas I guess this technology you're talking about here can solve for those imperfections. You don't need that perfectly placed product every time.
Yes, absolutely. But I would say that's a very restricted application of the technology. And unfortunately, that was one of the use cases that this technology got used for, like perfect, it's called perfect store, perfect placement, and for good reasons, because there are huge budgets that go into
Sure.
planning the actual, the store execution, and you need to make sure that the execution gets done properly.
Absolutely.
Now, that's fine, that's critical, and that's still a use case for the technology. Now, where we are seeing the technology starting to be really, really useful is the moment you use the same technology across different touch points across the supply chain. So the shelf is just one, but think about promotional displays, think about end caps, think about the coolers, think about convenience stores, think about large stores, think about the back rooms, think about the warehouses. And the moment you can capture insights in a unified way and standardize these insights. And this is what the technology allows you to do, to standardize the insights.
So it's not just that product on a shelf, it's that product in any scene, any retail scene. Because you've modeled it, you can assess it, you can find it, you can check its availability. It's quite game changing when you look at it like that.
I think it's a truly game changer, especially the moment you bring in, the moment you unify different, what we call use cases.
Yep.
Because for the first time now, the marketing department and the sales department, they can leverage the same technology to extract insights in a format that they can both understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that gives them almost like a common language to work together with.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, we're here on the podcast to talk about vertical AI, and I think the collaboration between Neurolabs and Aforza with our Aforza Vertical AI has been really excited. And we were recently at an event together where we were talking to customers and prospects about almost the concept of, one snap to impact. So a rep goes into a store, they take a photograph, and then how do we extract the visual intelligence and do something about that? And I think the partnership that we've got through the Aforza Studio Marketplace really makes us exciting. And maybe talk a little bit about, I know you like to talk about the eyes and the brain metaphor, but maybe I think a lot of people can relate to that who are listening. So do you want to just talk about how we use that to work together?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very easy to me to start with. So, because people ask me what Neurolabs is about. Well, we are eyes. We are the eyes in the field.
Sure.
So, think about us as being out there and understanding what's happening in the field. Now, if you have access to this vision, what do you do next, basically? So, taking the insights that you can see in a way, you take it back to your, in a way, brain, if you want, and this is just like one form of, like one type of insight, but then your brain has access to different types of data, right? You have, there are so many different data modalities, and
Sure.
the real benefit and the power comes from the moment you put together all these different data points, and then you start reasoning in a way
And do something with the insight. Yeah.
And Neurolabs is all about the eyes in the field. We believe that what the space is lacking today is this visibility.
Yep.
We believe there's a lot of brain power in the space, and we look at Aforza like being the brain that needs the visibility.
I love that. And if we just walk that through almost like in a day in the life use case, so the vision in the brain. So a rep walks into a store, and they're selling some chilled drinks or some soft drinks. So maybe they're placed in a fridge. So like you said, it's not the perfect shelf. It's something with a frosty window, or there's some condensation. They can take a photo, and then through the Neurolabs eyes, we can assess that photo, we can work out what products are there, what products are out of stock, what's not available, maybe even the detection of competitors.
Correct.
And then off the back of that, we can then pass that to Aforza with the Studio Marketplace to essentially act on that visual intelligence. So if a product's out of stock, maybe we place an order. If a competitor's there, maybe we run a promotion. There's so many things we can do.
Yeah, but in order to make all those decisions, you need to have access to
right.
Like to a lot more than just what you see in front of you, right? You need to know what should be there to begin with.
Yep.
So what what the eyes are doing, what Neurolabs is doing, the eyes are telling you what's the current state of the store. Now, if you have access to how the store should be like, but also if you have access to other things like historically what happened in this store, historically, what motivated people.
What did they order? What didn't they order? All that sort of good information.
Yeah, and all this it's almost like a memory layer,
Yeah.
and all this needs to sit within the brain, like needs to sit within the technology that is literally in the hands of the person out there in the field.
Yeah. No, right on. And I love this brain metaphor. If you go to the Aforza website now, we've personified Ava, and essentially, we talk about Ava being the world's most experienced commercial excellence coach. So you give Ava that photo and that insights, and she can act on it. And like you said, she's got the history of the account, she's got the background, she knows the preferences, and I really think the combination of our technologies together through the studio marketplace really gets exciting.
Yeah, and I think it's really exciting to think about what constitutes that brain as well, because you have. You have the Salesforce application, and that's very powerful by itself. So that can act like a brain, like a mini brain in a way.
Sure.
But then typically the customers, they have this even bigger brain internally in the form of like a data platform. So in a way, the Salesforce app can act as a brain, but also it's also a gateway to the bigger brain. Now, what I find sometimes difficult to explain to these customers is why, because I get asked, okay, but can you give us recommendations? Can you do that? And I'm like, no, okay, maybe technically we could come up with something, but it's not us that should be doing that, because you have that knowledge, like you have
you've
that
got
memory.
the memory,
exactly.
You've got the background. Yeah.
Exactly, and
so making sure that the technology can tap into that experience is so important. So look, this has been a really interesting conversation. If we look forward now to the future, what are you most excited about in the next 6 to 9 months? Where do you see this whole space going?
I think it's more and more about like truly leveraging the technology in the field. I think it's been way too long about, I think for way too long the technology, especially image recognition, was confined to the level of the front store and, kind of like reporting back on something.
Sure.
I really see customers taking a completely different approach to the technology now. They are looking at the technology as providing the fuel for their commercial executions, and they are turning their entire retail strategies, like retail execution strategies, towards a truly data-driven
across the supply chain.
Across the supply chain, yeah.
With that lens, how, just to really round out now, how important in this space do you think it is to be truly vertical? What difference do you think Neurolabs and Aforza brings to the market by only being focused on the consumer products industry?
I think there's no other way to do it than just focusing on this space, because going vertical, it's like the CPG space. It's a huge space.
Sure.
It's so complex that vertical dimension is it's a very, very large dimension.
It's not just food and beverage, it's spirits, it's alcohol, it's tobacco, it's consumer healthcare. There are many layers to it, but if you're not focused on that industry and you're doing 28 other industries, you don't get this space like we do.
Yeah, and probably one of the defining characteristics of the CPG space is really the fragmentation of the space.
Sure.
And that happens at so many different levels, like even from a regional level, but all the way to a department level, even within a CPG in one area.
Let alone the markets
so much fragmentation.
Around the world.
So I really see, and I'm very, very optimistic about the potential for the technology, and especially technology that is built with the sole goal to address business challenges in the CPG space, to join forces together and build something that is really not just powerful, but also it's easy for the end customer to use it in a way.
Yeah, right on.
And there's a lot of focus, and I think this is gonna be even more obvious next year. There's a lot of focus on how the end customer is using the technology. At least when it comes to image recognition, we are seeing a big shift towards from kind of out of the box point solutions to like technology as a service that comes within the customer's ecosystem in a more natural place.
To solve a problem, not just to act as a technology.
Yeah, because once the technology is inside the customer's ecosystem, they can like put it very, very closely to their own bigger CPG processes, and in this way they can extract value much more quickly.
Absolutely. Now, we talked about a lot today, and if any of our listeners want to understand how you can help them in the consumer products industry and really the differentiation with your synthetic data-driven approach to image recognition, how can they reach out and get in contact?
We are very friendly at Neurolabs, so yeah, reach out directly to me on LinkedIn, reach out directly to the Neurolabs team on our website. Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm very passionate about technology in general, and I'm still learning a lot about how technology can.
It never stops, right?
It never stops, and it's fascinating to see how quickly both the technology, but also the way customers, like the way the end customer is looking at technology changes, and especially for a space like the CPG one, because when I tell people what I do and like, oh yeah, you know, this technology, we operate in the consumer packaged goods space, and like, oh, really? But like, why that? Like, why not, you know, building some databases or, you know, but it's.
Because it's something that touches everybody. I think it's such a fascinating space, and it's so diverse.
To begin with, like, you tell me a bigger industry or like a bigger space than the consumer one, and there's so much room for improvement. There's so many big inefficiencies, and
we're helping, right? Every customer at a time. So look, we'll make sure to put your links and your details in the comments. So if anybody wants to reach out, then we'll make all of that available. And I just want to say thank you. It's been a fantastic episode. I'm really excited. Not just thank you for the podcast, but for our partnership and the customers we're working on together, and really what we're trying to do in the industry. It's ever so exciting.
No, thank you very much, Andy, for having me here. And yeah, let's get together again.
Let's do it. So for anybody listening, that's been another episode of the Aforza Vertical AI podcast, where we've really jumped into the vertical AI opportunity in the consumer products industry with Ava and Neurolabs. Please stay tuned, subscribe, and we'll be back with another episode probably in about 2 weeks' time. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Thank you,
Remus.
very much.